Hello, everybody, and welcome to a rare post-game edition of the Friday Football Show with myself, Tim Benz, and Mike DeCourcy. We'll do this, we know, at least one more time when the Steelers play on Thursday night against the Bengals later in the season. Normally, we're here and we are sort of previewing the game that'll be coming up for the Steelers whenever they do play, but after Thursday night games, it's a post-game edition. The Steelers wrapped up last night against the Carolina Panthers, their preseason 1910 victory. We are brought to you by Mike's Beer Bar on the North Shore. Try one of their 500 available craft beers. Grab some food, including the fabulous steak on a stone, and watch Pittsburgh sports all year long on one of their many TVs directly across from PNC Park at the end of the Clemente Bridge. Meet me at Mike's. You can also listen to them sponsor our pregame podcast, which I put up yesterday. Still plenty of good conversation and interviews on that, even though the game is over. So download it and follow it. The postgame podcast, again, brought to you by Mike's. As far as the games at PNC Park, the North Shore, I know you're very excited about this, Mike. Pirates and Rockies this weekend. It's the stadium series that no one could avoid. We tried to. Major League Baseball said it had to go on anyway, but there you have it. Rockies and Pirates is the walk-in for football season.
Well, the good news is that a very good Pittsburgh team will also be in action on Friday, and that's the Pitt women's volleyball team. They'll be playing Nebraska in a nationally televised match, so you don't even have to watch the least of the Pittsburgh teams if you don't want to. And you can still enjoy yourself on Friday evening.
Hey, by the way, we will be doing our show next Friday, even though there's no game to preview, because we just want to keep it going, keep people ready, reacting to the program, and stay in a regular rhythm of when we do it. And there's lots of college to talk about, too. So we'll talk about the cuts that the Steelers make. We'll talk about the final roster decisions, anything else that happens, trades, etc. But we'll also look at the college games that'll start playing. I'll be on the call for Duquesne against Pitt. I've been at Duquesne's practices. I don't know what the spread is, Mike, but Duquesne's covering. I'll put that out there right now.
Oh, okay. I like that.
I don't even know if there will be a spread, so that's a pretty safe bet for me. If you can find one, go ahead. More power to you. But what about last night? Well, let's do this, Mike. Let's sort of do the same thing that we do. We'll get to our 30,000-foot big picture view from Mount Washington like we always do to start the pregame portion of our show. But since we're wrapping up here, why don't you give me two takeaways that you had from the game last night against the Panthers and the finale for the Steelers? Give me a couple takeaways that you had, maybe one on offense, one on defense from the Steelers' last preseason game against Carolina.
Yeah, my first takeaway was earlier in the week, there was a lot of kerfuffle about the Steelers bringing in a wide receiver for a conversation. But there was also a report from ESPN's Jeremy Fowler that Dalton Risner, the guard who's now a free agent, there was a second-round pick out of Kansas State in 2019. I happened to profile him for the Sporting News in advance of that draft. He was eventually taken by his hometown team, the Broncos. He's moved around a little bit since. And if he's out there, it's going to be up to Dalton because there's no clear path to a starting spot here where there might be it somewhere that's struggling on the line like Cincinnati. So does he want to play more, or does he want to play for a team that maybe is more together and has its acting gear a little bit better than the Bengals? I think that's what he's going to have to decide. But what I saw on Thursday night and the absence of Isaac Seumalo throughout the exhibition season, and the fact that he had kind of a blah year last year, I think there's way too much focus on the offensive tackles with the Steelers and not nearly enough on the interior offensive line, especially that left guard spot. I just don't like where it's shaping up at this point. I thought Spencer Anderson had a poor game on Thursday night. One of the players that I would single out as really being, in Mike Tomlin speak, below the line. And so I think that that's something that they should really consider. I know it's much more glamorous to bring in a wide out, but I'm more concerned about depth on the offensive line and quality perhaps on the interior of the offensive line.
Well, especially if they think Seumalo's not going to make it, or if this injury that he's been dealing with early on in the preseason is that problematic, or maybe they just don't feel like McCormick has made the strides in the second year. that he should at this point. I don't know what the impetus was, or maybe to your previous point, Mike, it's just that there's a good player out there at a position where you might need a really good player. And if they think that Spencer Anderson is a good swing guy to get you from spot A to spot B in a game where you might need a player to play two positions at once just to get you home and get you out of the stadium, if that's his limit, then it's good to have a guy like Risner on board just to go to play either guard position for a longer stretch if Siamali were to go down, if McCormick were to go down at the very, very basic level. But you're right. If he's an upgrade from either of those two and they think they can get him, because they need to upgrade there in general, whether it's run blocking or pass blocking. We'll get more into Aaron Rodgers in just a little bit, but they got to keep him upright, and that's not just a tackle thing, to underscore your point.
Right. And McCollum, the backup center, really struggled.
He had 3 penalties, right?
Yeah, withholding calls, exactly. Ultimately, the last of them I thought was specious. We'll get into that later about the way the game was officiated. But I'm sure he was frustrated. We saw him throw his helmet on the sideline, and I think that it was a reaction to the quality of the call more so than frustration that he put himself in that position. But not a great situation on the interior offensive line for me, and that's my biggest issue with the team right now. And I think it's been overlooked throughout the preseason with the focus on a more glamorous tackle position on the O-line. So that would be my biggest takeaway overall. And then the second one that I came up with, it's not on the defensive side of the ball. It's still offense. I don't think you can cut Scotty Miller at this point. Unless you do make a deal, I think he's put himself in a position where he's just hard to let go. I know they only threw him the ball 9 times, and he made 5 catches a year ago. Seemed like he was out there more than that, didn't it?
Yeah, but it seems like he's been out there every snap of training camp.
But he had a great game.
He's the Energizer Bunny. He never gets tired. Yeah. That's one thing. He's good on special teams. You know, people were kind of saying, I kept hearing this today on the radio early on in the morning, and I heard some of it last night in conversations in the post game. Like, did he secure himself a spot on the roster? I thought he had been on since the start of August. I mean, like, he's somebody that they like on special teams to begin with. I thought he was going to have to play himself off of this roster. He's done anything but that.
Yeah, and I think he played the catch he made at the end of the first half was phenomenal, and the kind of play that I like the fact that they went for it. I would like to think that they would do something similar in a game, in a real game, to what they did in that circumstance. I don't think time in the NFL in 2025 is different than it was 25 years ago. I remember covering a Colts game when I was living in Indianapolis, and I believe the Lions had like 30 seconds left in what was, I believe, if I remember, a tie game when they got the ball, and I'm not even sure they had any timeouts.
Oh, don't say Lions and tie. That's because all I think about is that Mason Rudolph game.
Yes, of
Lions and tie.
But they actually covered enough ground to get a winning field goal out of that with 30 seconds. The time is different now. So don't give up and take a knee every time you get in that situation. So I like that. And I would like to see that in certain circumstances, not when you're up 21-0, but if you're in a game like that where 3 extra points is going to help you, go for it. And we'll see whether or not they carry that sort of aggression into the regular season.
All right, well, here's a takeaway that we can share. We'll both use this one as our third one, all right, Mike? And that is the injury to Derek Harmon, the first-round draft choice. That's obviously a huge talking point today. And when he left the field, man, you were thinking Achilles, ACL, something terrible by the way he was reacting. I mean, the look on his face that he had been told that his season was done. And then later in the game, he's out there yucking it up between Cam Hayward and TJ Watt on the bench. So, you know, I feel better about that. And Mike Tomlin said it was a knee injury of some description, which is one hell of a description. I don't really know what that description is. I just know it doesn't sound great. But he said
knee sprain of some description.
Yeah, knee sprain, right. Yeah.
Yes. So right away telling you, okay, sprain is not great, but it's not a tear. It's not a fully torn ligament, which was what everybody was concerned about. And Jerry Dulac reported very soon after the game that they're looking at multiple weeks. And of course, we have multiple weeks before they actually play. I don't know whether that gets him into the game against the Jets, but I think it suggests that he's not going to miss many more games than that if he misses any at all.
Well, I'll dovetail this with my other takeaway from the defensive side of the ball, and that is the rookies and how they played, because Harmon is obviously the head of that rookie class. But if we're going to talk about what the ripple effect is for this injury, then you got to talk about Y.A. Black and how well he played. You got to talk about DeMarvin Leal, who was more noticeable than he's ever been, good and bad. He did some good things. He flushed the quarterback a bunch, and he did get a couple penalties. He got a face mask. He lined up off sides. He's been featured more, it feels like to me, as an outside linebacker than a defensive lineman in this training camp and in this preseason. But if Harmon's going to be out for a while, if he starts on callback injury reserve, for instance, like I think they might do with Will Howard, and we'll get into that a little bit later on too. But if that's where Harmon is designated, then that opens up a spot maybe for somebody who wasn't otherwise going to make the team. And that could be Lee, that could be Loudermilk, that could be Leal. I don't think all three of those guys were going to make the team, but now they might because a spot has opened.
I think it was noticeable. I think it was noticeable and notable that Leal opened the game at the right outside linebacker position that usually belongs to Highsmith. And Highsmith obviously not active last night. And then
nor Herbig, it looked like, right? Because I didn't see Herbig either.
Right, exactly. But as the game wore on, they moved him inside to what was basically a DT position, DE, whatever you want to call it, that interior line spot. So I think they were trying to show him, hey, if you're going to make this team, this is what you're going to be. You're going to need to be able to do both. You need to be disruptive from the outside, and you're going to need to be able to handle interior line play and plugging holes and creating gaps for linebackers to fill, et cetera. I think that's how DeMarvin Leal makes this team. And I thought he had even with all the penalties, I thought he had an effective game. You'd like to see him bring down more of the guys that he got onto, but he still was disruptive. And disruptive, there's a value to disruption in the NFL. Even if you don't complete the play, you might create an opportunity for someone else.
And you can comment, by the way, folks who are watching right now, just go to the comment section and post what you took away from the game against the Carolina Panthers on Thursday night. I want to get back to Black for a little bit because I thought he was real good. Now, if we're looking at what Harmon was supposed to be, Harmon, to me, ostensibly was supposed to be better than Ogunjobi, but he was supposed to be Ogunjobi. He was supposed to start. So if you're talking about in the base, the three guys that start is going to be Benton, Hayward, and Harmon in for Ogunjobi, or it was going to be those three guys primarily as the two down linemen in the nickel or the dime defense. And then you have the outside linebackers on the other side. By the way, I did see Leal at the left outside linebacker position too at various points in that game. So they're moving him all over the place, trying to figure out where he could fit. But if Harmon is sidelined for a while, we don't know this. We don't know how long he's going to be out. It's very much up in the air at this point. Y.A. Black, to me, has done enough to buffer my concern there, to quell my concern, because I think he's been really good. And that was his most standout game so far. And granted, it came against Carolina Panther backups, but he was active and disruptive all night. And I think that was indicative of what we've seen from him in Latrobe, as well as earlier in the preseason. He had a couple sacks. He forced a fumble. And he had 5 tackles. He pushed the pocket. Everybody loves the celebration of the sack, the rub the belly thing that he's got going on. Who was that first? That B.J. Raji who did that first? Was he the guy who kind of got that going?
I didn't remember seeing him do that.
He might have. I also remember he did the Aaron Rodgers thing too.
Right. I remember that. But the rubbing the belly thing was something. There was a certain point where a lot of Steelers fans, I noticed on Twitter, when Harmon had been down and we still didn't know what the nature of the injury was, there were a lot of people yelling to get Y.A. Black out of the game. I am not a believer in protecting your players from the exhibition season necessarily. But when I looked out there, I had forgotten or hadn't remembered or whatever that Bank of America Stadium had switched its playing surface a few years back from natural grass to artificial. And when it gets to that, I'm like, okay, yeah, maybe you start to think about protecting this guy, protecting that guy. And so for once Harmon went down, I thought, yeah, YA Black's shown enough here. You can get him out. And it was only about maybe 4 or 5 plays after I had that thought that was the last we saw of the big fella, number 78. I think that he's been really good. And I would have liked to have seen him more frequently with the first group. But Keanu Benton needs those reps. And obviously a fellow rookie like Harmon needs those reps. So you understand why Black didn't get a lot of them. He will now because, like I said, at minimum, it's going to be a couple of weeks before Harmon is back. And I don't know who other than Black is a prime candidate to fill that vacancy. Because, I mean, how many times can you go to Isaiah Loudermilk and ask him to do a job that he's shown he can handle a few snaps here and there, but he's not a full-time player.
I swear he makes it a lot of times based on the fact that he's so tall and it makes it harder for kickers to kick. And he occasionally gets a block. I think Danny Smith loves that. I think that's part of the reason why he's here. And they've just never found capable depth to consistently and forever keep him off the roster. It hasn't happened yet. The other 2 guys that I thought were good on defense in the rookie class were Bruner and Sawyer. Bruner had 7 tackles, and I think he's a potentially good special teams keep if they decide to go there. That might be a stretch, but Sawyer, and they can always get him through to the practice squad anyway. Sawyer, I thought, had his most noticeable game, and he was effective in pushing the pocket, effective in creating some chaos, and he also had 5 tackles, I think a couple for loss. So those 2 guys, along with YA Black, were storylines to me.
Yeah, I'm very curious at this point. I love Jack Sawyer as a college player. We lived in Ohio for 18 years, so my wife likes to watch the Buckeyes. And so we watched a lot of Ohio State last year, and he was fantastic for them. He was one of those players who made I hate this cliche, but I'll use it to sort of communicate in the language of the sport. He made the splash plays. He made noticeable plays as an Ohio State player, and he did that in the exhibition season, particularly in Carolina on Thursday night. I'm very curious to see what he can become as an NFL player. The Steelers got him in a bargain round, and I think that he can become a very capable NFL player. I'm not predicting TJ Watt level superstardom here. I'm not. I just think he's somebody that can outgrow his draft position based on what we saw in the exhibition season. We all fell in love with Robinson a few years ago, and he's never been able to prove himself as an every down NFL player. He's a special teams guy, but I don't think that's what we're looking at with Jack Sawyer. I think we're looking at a guy who's a football player who can find a way to become a regular. Now, that's a steep path with the Steelers in the position he plays. But I think that over time, I do believe he'll find a role.
Remind me if I don't do it, but I think we're going to get to it eventually anyway. I want to get back to your point about how long the starters or even the key backups played or didn't play throughout the preseason, because I think that's a talking point we need to investigate a little bit more. But my other takeaway from the game, the reserve skill guys on offense. That was my offensive takeaway. You brought up Miller. I'm going to elevate him even beyond that. When I say reserve guys, I'm going deeper down the depth chart. I'm talking about McCutcheon. I'm talking about Keyshawn Williams. Those guys combined, I think, for about 83 yards receiving and a touchdown. Trey Sermon was good out of the backfield. Yes. He had a really nice run. And Skylar Thompson flashing again at quarterback. I don't know how long you watched the post-game show after, Mike, if at all, if you made it that far. If anybody did, good for you. But Ramon Foster was on the post-game show, and he was suggesting that maybe Skylar Thompson, forget him being the 3, maybe he should be considered as the number 2 instead of Mason Rudolph. I'm not going to go that far. Mason did not have a good game. I know he threw a pick on a bad decision that was started with a bad snap, by the way, last week against Tampa Bay. That was also not a good throw this time. So he's had 2 poor interceptions in 2 weeks. He was great in the first game, I thought. He bounced back well against Tampa and led that scoring drive through a nice deep ball to Wilson. Not really the bounce back this time after the interception. I'm still fine with Mason Rudolph being the number 2 quarterback. I got to consider who Skylar Thompson is doing this against.
Right.
It does make me feel a lot better about potentially taking what they do with Howard, kind of like we we're just talking about with Harmon. If you get to cutdown day and you put somebody on IR designated to return on cutdown day, they don't have to be on IR the whole year. You can do that on cutdown day. So that's what I would do. Keep Thompson for as long as you need him. If you get to 4 weeks when Howard is maybe healthy by then, or 8 weeks if Howard is healthy by then, okay, make a decision on Skylar Thompson. But if not, and you need to have him around, that's probably better than having Howard around anyway at this point and incubate the rookie for as long as you can. That's what I think.
I don't see any reason at this point not to put Howard on IR. I don't see any reason at all because he missed the entire exhibition season, which was almost designed for him to show what he's capable of. And we didn't see any of it because of the injury in practice a while back. So put him on IR, then keep Skylar Thompson as your third emergency QB. Allow Will Howard. Look, Will Howard's not playing for you this year. He's not. And so allow him to grow in practice without having to expose him to waivers or anything in order to get him to the practice squad. He can. Now, I think there are things that you can't do with him during his IR period that you would be able to do if he was on the roster or the practice squad physically. But at the same time, he's not going to play. Honestly, I think that keeping him on IR for as long as you can is probably the best approach because he's missed his window by not being able to play in the exhibition season. To be ready to be anything other than a practice squad level quarterback this year. Again, you don't want to have to expose him to waivers to get him to the practice squad. So keep him on the IR list and go from there. I think he's still got potential. That's the one thing about this exhibition season that's a disappointment, honestly. The fact that he wasn't able to get out there. I know we missed out on lots of great conversation about how he should be supplanting Aaron Rodgers and all that.
Yes.
But it's a disappointment that he didn't get to show anything. And now I think you have to be realistic about what he's able to give you as a football player in 2025. It's not about his development anymore. It's about what's best for this team. And I from what I saw in exhibition season, Skylar Thompson is a capable third guy. He's a Kyle Allen level player. Kyle Allen threw one pass in 2024. It was a completion. I believe it went for 19 yards, converted a first down when it had to. That's all you'll probably ever need from Skylar Thompson. But you want to know that player can go in there and do that at that moment.
All right, let's hear from Steelers fans. Make sure you put your comments up. What do you want to see done with Skylar Thompson? What do you want to see done with Will Howard? What do you want to see done with Mason Rudolph? Let's talk about the backup quarterbacks because, damn it, that's what we do in August, talking about the backup quarterbacks. So get your comments in. I got a bunch already stocked up and ready to go. Time now for our view from Mount Washington on the preseason overall, our 30,000-foot big picture look on where the season is going to go. Now, the preseason is over. The big hanging question for me is, well, we just kind of talked about it a little bit, Mike. The jury is still out on Aaron Rodgers. Like the biggest unknown is still unknown. What we don't know, we don't know. We don't know about how this is going to go with Aaron Rodgers. And look, he has won the PR battle.
Yes.
For as badly as the PR battle went for Cam Hayward, it's 180 degrees the opposite for Aaron Rodgers. It's to the point where I think people who were doubtful of how well things could go for him as a quarterback have talked themselves into thinking it's going to go better on the field because he's talked a good game off of it, which blows my mind that we've gotten this far with it. Like, all Aaron Rodgers has done, in my view, has so far proven that he probably won't be a dink early in the season. Okay, that's it. That's all he's done. Like, even the talking part of it has been easy. Nothing bad has happened yet. There's been nothing to get upset about. There's been nothing controversial. All he's had to do is go out there and say how great it is to play under Mike Tomlin, how great it is to throw to DK Metcalf, how great it is to put on the black and gold, and he's done all that. What else did you think he was going to do? I mean, go ahead. You had a thought on that?
Well, what I thought he was going to do, Tim, was be Aaron Rodgers. The Aaron Rodgers we've seen for the last 4 years in particular, but even at various points in his career, if you watch the documentary, I was just stunned to hear Marshawn Lynch say in the documentary that in very early in Aaron's time at Cal, he was already overruling the coaches. And I don't mind him overruling Arthur Smith at the line of scrimmage or something like that. But when you're a first-time college starter and you're telling Marshawn Lynch, don't worry about what the coaches say, I got this. I mean, that's your first concern. And then there's all the other stuff that happened over the last 4 or 5 years from him relative to public interactions. So yeah, I thought that was going to be a problem. And he had even down to his on-field interview last night during the game with Missy Matthews. He has not, in soccer, there's a saying usually used about defenders. He has not put a foot wrong, which means he never opens up any opportunity for the opposition to do something spectacular or successful. And that's been Aaron Rodgers throughout, from the time he met us at minicamp back in May, I believe it was, until that interaction last night. He just hasn't said anything wrong. Now, you're right. There haven't been any difficult circumstances yet, and we will see whether or not that creates a different Aaron. But I have been impressed by that. You're right that we don't know what we're going to see in terms of him versus NFL defenses. The reporters who went to the open practice got to see him against the Bucs in a relatively live situation last week. Obviously, going against his own defense has been a significant challenge because there are great players on the other side of that line, T.J. Watt, Jalen Ramsey, et cetera. But the fact that they passed entirely on the exhibition season does leave the question open relative to performance that you raised.
I think we have very selective memories. And one thing we have chosen to forget is that Russell Wilson was talked about exactly the same way at this time. In fact, Russell Wilson was talked about this way all the way up until 7 weeks into his starting venture as the Steelers quarterback when he came back from the second calf injury, the reoccurrence of the calf injury. He talked a great game too. And we all said, boy, I get it. It comes off a little bit phony. It comes off a little bit rehearsed. He comes off sounding like a congressman or somebody running for mayor as much as he does quarterback. But we all at the same time embraced it because that phrase I kept hearing over and over again emanating from Latrobe is there's an adult in the room now. Like we heard that about Rodgers, about their Freudian slip. We heard that about Wilson all the time. And the same thing is being applied to Rodgers now. And the Steelers were 10-3 and everybody was hunky-dory. Everybody was loving Russell Wilson and how things were going. And it lasted that way all the way until it didn't.
Well, but let's look at that a little bit, Tim, and go back at that. Okay, so he was 6-1, 7
6-1, yeah.
Or 10-3. And I believe at that point they go to Philly.
Yes.
Philly was prior to Baltimore. And so Philly, they hung with Philly, the eventual Super Bowl champion, until Najee fumbles in the third quarter. And that's when it fell apart. So again, Russ wasn't playing below the line in that game. Against Baltimore, they're ready to go up a score in a game where it's going to be down, every possession counts. It's going to be very difficult. And then that game doesn't fall apart until Russ makes the decision to take on a tackler instead of sliding just at the goal line. and he fumbles. So again, he was playing adequately or above the line in that
That was
game
the
as
Marlon
well.
Humphrey pick 6 too, wasn't it?
Well, that was that came after. They were about to go up, I believe, 14-7, or they had the opportunity to go up 14-7 I think it was the second quarter, when Russ scrambled deep into Baltimore secondary, and instead of either sliding or going away from the tackler, he decided to take him on and fumbled. And they lost the fumble. They lose that opportunity to take the lead. The whole game switches around there. So he didn't play that badly. So I think that because everything went to heck, and then of course there's the Cincinnati game, which I've been over a lot of times.
Oh, well, I mean, if your point is that the dramatic, cataclysmic end of the season skewed our interpretation of how well Russell Wilson played overall, I agree 100%. I've made that point 1,000 times, that if you shook up the results of what happened to the Steelers last year and you had 10-7 just fall a different way, Russell Wilson's the quarterback right now.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that necessarily would have
bad
been the
begot
latest.
bad begot bad, and it got to the point where there was just an untenable angst going on about why they were losing, how they were losing, and it bled over into the whole play calling thing with him and the assistant coaches and the head coach for that matter too, I think.
Right, and that's why I look at this and say, yeah, okay, so Russ said all the right things, but then he kind of did all the right things. Look, if Aaron Rodgers plays as well generally, of course, you'd ideally have him for 17 games rather than a shortened period. But if he plays at or above the level that Russ played last year, I'm not sure that's necessarily a bad outcome, because the defense should be better with the secondary improvements. Hopefully the running game is less spotty. You want to see a consistency to the run game that wasn't there a year ago. The 1-yard runs there were too many one and none and negative yard run plays last year. You want to see more 3-yard run plays instead of 0 or 1. 3-yard is a loss to an extent, but it's not a disaster, because now you're in 2nd and 7. That's a big, because if you have 2 3-yard runs, it's 3rd and 4, not 2 1-yard runs and it's 3rd and 8. It's a big difference. So we hope to see that. So I think that I'm not saying that Russ is going to be as good as Wilson. Excuse me, that
Rodgers is going
to be as good as Russ was last year. To your point, we don't know, and I totally agree with you on that. I'm just saying that the standard that Russ set last year is not that low a bar, and that if he clears it, there could be good things for this team.
Well, okay, and I'll wrap up on this, and then we'll get into the fact that he hasn't played it all yet. We'll talk about that in a second. We'll get to your point on this, but sort of dovetailing that thought, did you see what that monologue that Greenberg had on the Get Up show on ESPN?
I did not.
Now understand that Greeny could take a conversation about Mets Yankees and make it about how good of a coach Mike Tomlin is if he wanted to. Like, no offense to Rich Eisen, he has been surpassed by Greenberg as the king of the Mike Tomlin defenders. All right. And sometimes, Mike, I know you want to be in that court too, but the king right now is Greenberg. All right. You got a long way to go to catch Greenberg when it comes to this. He started off talking about Aaron Rodgers and why he thinks it's going to work out well in Pittsburgh for Rodgers. But it was basically a long loop around so he could cite the same stats about why Mike Tomlin's a great coach and why everybody in Pittsburgh is too mean to him when they criticize him. Okay. But we have to divorce ourselves from Tomlin as the coach with Roethlisberger pre-2011 and what has happened since then, okay? Because there was a long stretch of time where Roethlisberger was here from 2011 to, I'll even say healthy, through 2018 before the elbow went bad, where they didn't do anything in the playoffs. And we all know that Tomlin can put up good records when he has a quarterback of Ben Roethlisberger's caliber, which Aaron Rodgers was. I don't think he is now. He's kind of like Ben Roethlisberger caliber in 2021. Like around then, coming back from the injury, 2020.
Well, one hopes not. I mean, that's not a terrible standard, but one hopes it's at least slightly better than 2021 Ben.
But my point is that even though when he had Roethlisberger in his prime, they still had a couple of 8-8 seasons. They still didn't win playoffs from 2011 on. So if that was an attempt to shoehorn yet another monologue about how great Tomlin is, I think it backfired a bit, and it might have also subtracted from the nature of the conversation, which is more about who is Aaron Rodgers now.
Right.
We know who Mike Tomlin is.
Right.
We're trying to rediscover who Mike Tomlin is. We've been doing that from a winning standpoint in the playoffs since 2010. But Rodgers, to me, the more germane conversation is by his arm, his legs, his ability to read and recognize. Is he better than 2021 Ben Roethlisberger? And if he is, what does that calculate into? Because it was still only 9-8 for the Steelers.
Well, yeah, but again, it's a whole team picture thing, and that's where, like you said, 2021 Ben was not elite at that point.
No.
He even 2020 when they started 11-0. It was largely a product of an elite defense and an offense taking advantage of nearly all the opportunities that defense presented them. They were elite through the injuries that took out Bush, and they took out half the linebacker core. They were never the same after that. So I think the standard has to be 2017 Ben, 2018 Ben. That's what you. If Rodgers gets to that level now, then I think that you can have a very successful season. And I can't say that he will.
Too.
Right. Of course, I can't say he will. I can only say that I think that that he has the opportunity to be that. We just don't know how much of the failures of the Jets was the Jets being the Jets, and how much it was Aaron being past his prime. I wrote back in May or April when the Steelers finally pulled the trigger on signing him that I thought that he was past it and that he did not fit the Steelers standards. He has made me wrong to this point on the first part with the public interaction. So now we'll see when they start to play against the Jets whether I was wrong on the second.
Well, the other point you wanted to bring up here, your big picture view of where they are right now and how the preseason went, is the conservative approach to the preseason games, who played, who didn't. Aaron Rodgers, chief among that in the conversation. What do you think? Do they hamper themselves by doing what they did?
Well, I'm not that – in a 17-game schedule, I'm not that worried about whether or not you, quote, get off to a bad start. I mean, I heard yesterday conversation on an NFL channel on satellite radio about the Bengals playing Joe Burrow and a lot of their other starters because through multiple games of the exhibition season because they were concerned about getting off to a slow start. And the host or the analyst said they got off to a 4-8 start last year. Well, that's 12 games, man. Like that's not a start.
That's the season until they tried to save it, right? Yeah.
So I look at it as we don't know whether or not in a 17-game NFL season, not playing much in the exhibitions has an impact. My only point is that from a practical standpoint, I don't think there's that much greater injury risk in a preseason game than there is in a preseason practice. I just think logically in a full contact practice, and there aren't that many of them, but there are more than there are exhibition games. You're just as exposed to the possibility of getting hurt as you are in a game. So why not play in the games? If you have them, why not use them for what they're there for? We saw Rodgers get nicked. It fortunately turned out to be nothing in a scrimmage up at Latrobe. We saw
he got stepped on when he got Cleveland. Yeah.
But it turned out to be nothing. We saw Sawyer hurt his hand and be unable to play for the rest of the regular season, or excuse me, the rest of the preseason in a camp situation. And we saw Derek Harmon get hurt in an exhibition game. So
Howard, you meant Howard, not Sawyer. Sorry.
I'm sorry. Will Howard. Yeah. My bad. Yeah. So it can be in any circumstance that you have these situations come up. One of the interesting things to me is the idea of are they now thinking along the lines of with 17 games, do you want to just keep all the wear and tear? Is this a load management situation at all? Because there is this narrative about the Steelers based on 2020, this past season, 2024, that they collapse every December. It's not true. The stats don't bear that out at all. They're 15-14 post December 1 in the last 5 years, 32-22 over the past 10 years. So it's not a habitual thing. It's just we remember when they do collapse more so than when they play well.
How they've done it is consistent, and when they've done it is consistent. Like, some of those numbers that bailed them out in that is the Mason Rudolph year. If you take away those 3 wins, that skews things dramatically because they had blown it after getting off to a 7-4 start. Right. They lost those 3 horrible games against Indianapolis, Arizona, and New England. Not in that order, but those 3 games. And then Rudolph did bail them out, thus helping the December numbers. But, 7-2-1 in 2018 to 9-6-1 and out of the playoffs is something. I'll give you another year that sort of helped them out in that regard. They went 6-2 after they started 2-6 in the year that TJ Watt got hurt. Right. So that's sort of helped the numbers in that regard.
Well, that's the nature of it. I mean, you could say from the other side, last year the numbers were poor, but yeah, you had to play a ridiculous schedule that included 3 of the 4 or 5 best teams in the league and all stacked into a period of 11 days. I mean, the numbers are what they are. And you can sort of gerrymander the concept of, well, they played well in this year. Mason Rudolph won 3 games down the stretch. Yeah, but he had to win them and they had to win them. Just the same as last year, the schedule was preposterous and most every NFL team would have put up similar results. Most NFL teams, honestly, would have gotten smoked in all 3 of those games, and they only got handled in 1 of them.
I'll say my piece on this quickly, and then we'll get to some other topics. But I'm normally one who is all for resting the players. I think you know preseason need when you see it. You didn't have to play TJ Watt. You didn't have to play Cam Hayward. You don't have to play Alex Highsmith. You might not even have to play Patrick Queen, and even to a certain degree, Peyton Wilson. Okay, but I think they did have to get the defensive backs out there, and maybe for longer than they did, because that's supposed to be the big difference in the defense this year. I wouldn't have minded seeing Rodgers and DK Metcalf to see how that was going to look for a series or 2, maybe once or twice in each game, or maybe 2 or 3 series in this game. Because let's think about it. There's 16 games. If it is a nick or a ding, it is going to heal in 2 weeks. If it's something cataclysmic, to your previous point, then it's something cataclysmic, and that could happen in week 1 like it did with Rodgers, or it could what happened in week -1, which would have been this game against the Panthers, if you want to look at it that way. I think you know it when you see it in terms of need. They needed, and the perfect example of this, we've talked about it briefly already, is Jaylen Warren. Jaylen Warren needed to get hit because you knew he was going to fumble at some point, and he fumbled because, unfortunately, he fumbles more than he should. Yes. And I think he needed to get hit to kind of get that out of his system, like a hit in anger, not a training camp hit, but a hit. Somebody trying to take the ball away. And it was a little bit of a fluky one. Somebody got a punch in, but that's what I'm talking about. So I'm glad they did it in that regard. For the most part, I was fine with it. I would have liked to have seen a little bit more from the D-backs, since that's going to be such a big deal. And I would have also liked to see Rodgers at least in there a little bit in one game to see how it was all going to go.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think Rodgers should have played against Tampa.
I just don't want the excuse in September now that they're rusty. Now, if they get off to a 1-2-1 start, which they also did in 2018, that's the consistency, Mike, is they're always great in October and November. They're fantastic from like week 6 to week 12. They're just like they were last year. Last year, they were even 2-2 or 3-2, but the offense got off to a horrific start. The defense is so frequently ahead of the offense and kind of carries them and guides them along. That happened last year. What was the year where Kenny started? They started 3-2 before things got really wonky, but the defense was carrying the day.
Right.
And I just don't want that built-in excuse of, it's early. Well, you didn't have to make it quite as early by putting Rodgers in bubble wrap. I get it. I get the mentality. I know why you did it. And like I said, normally I would have done the same thing with a 41-year-old quarterback. When everything is new, though, I would have liked to have seen it a little bit. And same thing with the defensive backs on the other side of the ball. Not too many other guys aside from that, but I know it when I see it. And those are the two areas where I wanted to see it.
Yeah, I 100% agree with both of those points. I thought that when you have the home exhibition game, especially when it's the second game, which is the game you usually like to get them out there, so you have the field conditions under your control. I thought it was the perfect opportunity to get them out there, and I think that was a whiff to not get at least a couple of series for the offense. And as you said, the defensive backs at least got some time in Carolina, but it would have been better for them to have played in the prior week here in Pittsburgh, where again it's your field, so you don't have to worry about whether turf causes a problem, and they get a chance to get some rhythm. I did like what I saw out of that group generally, but especially Samuels. I know that was a terrible penalty that he took, but I mean, it showed how fierce a football player he can be that he made the play that he did.
One other topic before we get to one or two league items, and then I want to get some comments too that we have here, and you still got time to get your comments in as well. Beanie Bishop, his absence yesterday. I haven't checked online. Something might have come out by the time that we've been on, but he didn't play at all, and that was right after Terrell Austin said it was going to be a huge gain for him. So I don't know if he was hurt. I don't know if he was sick. I don't know if he's part of a trade. I don't know if they made the decision already that they're going to cut him and they just didn't want him to get hurt so he could latch on somewhere else, or they didn't want to pay him if he did get hurt and they didn't think they could move him. Like, all these things are going through my mind as to what happened with that yesterday, but it was noticeable that he didn't play.
Yeah, an oddity for sure. And you presented a number of different plausible scenarios that would have accounted for him not participating beyond the possibility that he got dinged or sick or whatever. He is a valuable player to have in your rotation. I think he might have gotten usurped, however. So I think that, look, if he's able to catch on somewhere else, good for him. If he's not, I would definitely keep him in the organization. If he's not, if as it appears, Eccles has passed him. And you don't have room for him on the roster because he's not really a special teams guy.
One note you brought up, you said Pat Freiermuth blocked like someone who knows his job depends on it.
Yeah, I thought he was terrific. And that holding call was preposterous. And again, we'll get to the refs.
20 penalties overall, 13 for the Steelers, 7 for the Panthers. And they switched refs in the middle of the game. Did you notice that?
Yeah, I did notice that. I didn't know what that was.
The other ref get sick or heat exhaustion or something there? Or
I wondered what happened there. I did find
just
that
like going
odd,
to Skylar Thompson for the referees. Maybe they've done it the entire preseason and I just haven't noticed it. But
no, I don't think they did. Something must have been up. I don't think they did that.
Or maybe the first guy's arm was tired from throwing so many flags. I don't know. He's on a pitch count like Paul Skeens or Bubble Chandler.
Strained his voice because he was talking too much on the microphone. But that Freiermuth play that opened that was legit. It was a they would not call that in a regular game. I don't believe. I think they were trying to send a message at the end of the preseason. That's the only thing I could think of. Maybe it was that particular crew. See, it's one of those two. Maybe that's a flag happy crew. But there were preposterous penalties called, and one of the chiefs among them was that Freiermuth play. He was terrific blocking last night. It's the best I've ever seen him block, the most determined I've ever seen him block. And it's not bad to have a tag team partner like Mount Washington when you're out there clearing the edge. They were on the same side a lot of times and really doing a nice job. But I think he showed he understands. The guy they brought in, Jonnu Smith, is probably a little bit better receiver than he is. The guy that they drafted a couple of years ago, Washington, is a lot better blocker than he is. So he's got to be good at everything in order to keep his spot.
Let's go around the league, Mike, and I'll throw a couple of topics at you. You tell me if any of these are of interest to you or if you want to start somewhere else before we get to some comments here to wrap up the show. But Jackson Dart played pretty well again for New York. In fact, all three quarterbacks played well, and Russ didn't, but Russ is still the starter. Sky Moore and who's the other guy? Bailey from the Broncos got traded. So wide receivers are moving around, just not to Pittsburgh, at least at the time that you and I are speaking. Joe Flacco is going to start in Cleveland. I think we all knew that was probably going to happen, but now it has been said. And the Micah Parsons situation, for people who are unaware, he has removed any reference to the Cowboys from his social media. He is now Micah Parsons, class of 21 Penn State Nittany Lion, in case anybody forgot that, on his social media. And then you have Jerry Jones on Michael Irvin's podcast.
Yes.
Let me say that sentence again. Jerry Jones went on Michael Irvin's podcast and said that the agent told him to stick it up his ass when he went to the agent with the handshake agreement that he had with Micah Parsons, which I don't think you're supposed to do. And I think there are league rules against that, but Jerry doesn't seem to have any problem telling the world what's happened here. So if there are league rules, no one's doing anything about it. And that's where the situation sits, and it's a mess.
It is a mess. And I don't understand Jerry Jones as an owner. I don't know why he thinks he's a general manager. I think most people would like to have him as an owner because he's not afraid to spend money where it needs to be spent, but I'd never want him as my GM because he has no idea where to spend it. Mm-hmm. Paying Dak Prescott what he did a year ago was ridiculous. And I don't understand the execution problem here with Parsons, why he would try to negotiate or conversate directly with Parsons about this. On the other hand, apparently, at least according to various reports and somewhat confirmed by Jones himself, he offered Parsons the most guaranteed money any defensive player's ever been offered, and that it still hasn't led to an agreement. So a very weird situation. I want to seize on what you brought up about Jackson Dart, because although he doesn't exactly fit the category of what I wrote about earlier in the week when Indianapolis chose Daniel Jones, also known as Danny Dimes from the New York media, over Anthony Richardson as their starting quarterback for the opener this season. Anthony Richardson was the number 4 overall player selected in the 2023 draft. And it led me to look at what have NFL, because I remember Trey Lance and various others, what have NFL teams done relatively with top 5 quarterbacks over the last decade? And let me tell you, Tim, the results have been a disaster. Like, it's been an absolute train wreck. There, you have your Baker Mayfields and Sam Darnolds who have become relatively successful NFL quarterbacks on their 3rd, 4th, or 5th teams. But in terms of players who were selected, there were 17 over the 10 years from 2023 back. I didn't want to throw in last year Caleb Williams. We don't know what he's going to be. So just went 2023 back. There were 17 players, quarterbacks, selected in the top 5 picks going back a decade. And 9 of them are abject flops. 3 of them are still kind of out there to be decided. Tua, Lawrence in Jacksonville, et cetera. So we're not having almost any successes out of this position in this circumstance. You have very few players who have developed. And I think my position is that it's the rush to throw them onto the field and make them starters on day one. We've had guys that have done success, have earned success. Ben would be an example of that by having gone into that situation. But most of the best NFL quarterbacks now, Mahomes, are the most successful in recent years. Mahomes, Rodgers, Brady sat for a while before they became starters. And it helped them, I believe. This rush to get them out there to earn, to prove that you made the right pick or to get what you paid for or whatever it is, it hasn't been successful. It's producing failure. Of those 17 and of the 9 failures, the only one who didn't get in, or who didn't either get a majority of starts in his rookie year or start on day one, basically was Lance, who didn't play much at all. But most of the flops are guys that are getting thrown out there every week, week one, and failing. And Anthony Richardson fits that bill. So Jackson Dart, let him sit. I don't care what happens to the Giants this year. If Jackson Dart is a quality NFL quarterback, let him sit 1 game, 5 games, 10 games, whatever, maybe even a whole year like Patrick Mahomes did. But in the end, I think if he's legit, I still question his arm strength a little bit. But if he's legit, if I'm the Giants, I let him sit and wait until next year.
All right, let's get to some comments here. Mark says, September is the new August. Defenses are ahead of the offense for the first month, unless you're the Bengals. All right, touche on that point. But yeah, that actually speaks very much to what I was talking about before. And I think the correlation, I've written about this in the Trib many times, Mike, a lot lately, that I think part of the reason why you see the slow starts from the Steelers, sometimes they're masked and they have better records coming out of September, early October than what they played, is because the defense is fast, it's fresh, it's running around, it's making plays, and they're winning 18-16. And then you get to the back half of the year and they start losing 26-21 because they're playing catch up late because the defense is just gassed and injured and banged up. There's just attrition. And, maybe the offense is caught up a little bit because they, as I keep saying, often go like 7-1 in October and November before Thanksgiving. That's where it coalesces. That's where the never had a losing season streak has been forged, is the middle part of these seasons so many times for Tomlin. But then, the arrows start going the other direction, and the defense just can't keep it up for that long. I think this guy is onto something. That's a good point.
Yeah, and I think that's something that one of the things the Steelers have done, and this is where I think it plays into that, is the Steelers have been content, and some of this is quarterback driven because we haven't had in Pittsburgh a legit number one quarterback since 2018. And Ben post-injury was not what he had been. He was fine, but he wasn't what he had been. And then you had the Kenny Pickett years, and last year you didn't. If you had a full year of rest, maybe, but you didn't. So what we're seeing is a team that basically says, defense, go win the game, which means throw everything out there and not, going out and being aggressive and assertive on offense and scoring a lot of points. And your defense doesn't have to sacrifice everything they have for the first 6 weeks of the season so that the team's record can be, floated up to the surface. I think that's probably part of the issue of why they get worn out in the latter part of the year. Like I said, even if the record isn't as bad as it's been portrayed, it's still not good. Like over the last 5 years, it's only 15-14. You're not being a highly successful NFL team if you're 500 in the December games. The previous years, the previous 5 years, they were 17-8 in years like 2016, 2017, et cetera, when they were very successful teams. So I think that that's probably been a problem, that because they haven't had great quarterback play, that they put too much on the defense, and that helps wear it out. And it's another reason why it would have been nice to see a little bit of Aaron Rodgers, so we could come out week one and see whether or not he could be legit and helping the team win, not just not hurting them.
Let's rattle through a few more, Mike. From Weatherman 21B, not having the first string players play as a team in any preseason games, inviting injuries, chaos, communication, no cohesiveness, no learning your abilities and disabilities, no leadership, familiarity, and typically a Tomlin team to miss the playoffs for another season. I can cite when they didn't have a preseason at all and they went 11-0 to start in 2020. I can also cite when they had Kenny Pickett look like Joe Montana for a couple of games in 2023 in the preseason. Even last year, Russell Wilson, when he did play, when he came back from the calf, and he just let him down the field and they scored a touchdown on the first drive. And then Justin Fields starts the season. So, there's no rhyme or reason. There's no rhythm. There's no A plus B always equals C to what happens coming out of the preseason to how that's going to correlate to the regular season. There really isn't a consistent thread to pull on.
I didn't look this up and I wanted to, so I apologize. But didn't the Kenny Pickett 158.3 precede the absolute meltdown against San Francisco in the home opener?
Yes.
Yeah. So, I can't get with that comment / question. Although I do think it would have benefited the Steelers to have put the starters out there more in the preseason. I can't then go with that criticism and correlate it to any previous failures, because they didn't follow the same course in 2023 that they followed this year. Kenny Pickett played a fair amount as the incumbent starting quarterback and played at an exorbitant level, and they still came out and absolutely face planted in their home opener.
Couple more here. My humble opinion regarding Hayward's shenanigans. He just doesn't like sweating at Steelers St. Vincent football camp. Plain and simple. Some players hate the dorms, the heat, etc. Will do anything to get out of camp, except he was there. He was there. The only thing he wasn't doing was practicing. He was there sweating it out and sleeping on the same crummy beds as everybody else. So like, that's not all entirely true. It's not like he was back home waiting for the team to return for the game against Tampa Bay.
Right. And he waited till the very end of the time in St. Vincent before he did decide to start the hold-in, so to speak. So he missed the opportunity to get out of the July heat, the early August heat, and his hold-in, I think, bridged the exit from St. Vincent and the return to the South Side. And then he returned to activity.
The first time he had full activity was the practice before Wednesday when they went to Carolina. So that Tuesday.
Yeah. So he missed he missed time, the dual practice with Tampa, et cetera. Mm-hmm. So although I do agree he wanted to practice as little as possible. If it was just about the training camp, he executed that as poorly. Cam did executed that as poorly as he did the contract that he signed in 2024.
And lastly, from E-Dog on Tomlin, haven't had a quarterback in 4 years. A miracle he made the playoffs with the bums that he played after Roethlisberger. Okay, who was in charge of bringing those bums on board? It's not like anyone said, hey, Mike, Mitch Trubisky has to be your quarterback. He could have said no. He's been there 18 years. He's in charge as much as anyone. It's not like Kevin Colbert said, I'm giving you Kenny Pickett. Peace out. That's not how that worked. Okay. So yes. And it's Tomlin who has never wanted to play Rudolph or brings back Rudolph all the time. These are his decisions too. Let's stop with that.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the supply is limited, but they did have, I was the first person literally to criticize the Pickett selection when they made it in the draft in 2022, I believe it was. I tweeted out like that moment, the Steelers will regret this for years. And I was 100% right in that. A lot of people said he's going to be good. They were wrong. A lot of people said, well, why would it be years? And I'm like, because it takes a while to recover from the wrong quarterback, because opportunity cost of selecting someone who could have helped you win games, et cetera. So he was responsible for that. It is tough, though, to get the right quarterback at any point. Mm-hmm. And I mentioned before that the top 5 guys, how often they flopped. It's not easy to find that player. And so I think it's been impressive that he's been able to have the number of winning seasons that he has in the quarterback vacuum or non-losing seasons going back to 2019. I think it's been impressive, but the ideal is do a better job evaluating than when you took Kenny in with the first round, 20th overall pick. This next time around, do a better job of evaluating. I don't think that he handled the transition out of last season well. I thought they stepped into a really good situation for where they were to get Justin Fields and Russell Wilson. And the fact that neither of them is here now indicates that they didn't execute last year well. And we'll only know if they executed this year well once we start seeing Aaron Rodgers play real games or any kind of games. But all this stuff are real games.
Great job, Mike. We'll do it again next week. And we will do it again next week, even though there is no Steeler game to talk about. We'll still do the Friday Football Show brought to you by Mike's Beer Bar, because there will be college games to talk about. And like I mentioned before, the roster will be set. There'll be plenty of Steelers news to discuss. We'll talk about Penn State. We'll talk about West Virginia, and we'll talk about Duquesne, at least covering against Pitt. That's my call. So we will do that next Friday. Be with us here, courtesy of Mike's Beer Bar on the Trib Live Facebook live stream and on YouTube as well at Trib Sports. Meet me at Mike's.